company, we got started in 2016. I personally was almost struck and killed by an ambulance in Chicago, and I was working in the automotive world, and so we started to look at how can we get emergency vehicles to talk to cars? And of course, that's very difficult to do. So over the years, since 2016, we've now added more than 4,000 agencies to our platform. This is across police, fire, EMS, towing, roadside assist, all sorts of folks that are at risk working in the roadway. We've processed over 10 billion driver alerts, which you'll be able to see live today. We work with federal, state, and local agencies. I heard one of the colleagues today mention working, I think it was Colorado Springs, working with some of the federal military bases, which we also work with because they respond on and off base. So this technology is not just designated for state and local. We also come standard on fleet manufacturers. So every day across the country, what you'll see here is how emergency vehicles are already being delivered into your community with this safety service already installed, already paid for, and really doesn't cost your city a dime. So I'm not going to show a bunch of videos with crashes and collisions. You all know what this is. You know what this looks like. We've talked a lot about these statistics here. Actually, in the fire, police, and EMS space, we just lost our 38th first responder. This was in Avada, Colorado. I think it was 3 days ago. Officer Dunn. So this stuff is really close and really personal to the folks that we serve in public safety, and we hear about these things, unfortunately, all the time. And you'll notice that this says, and work zone fatalities. So it's not just the first responders out there, but it's anybody working in the roadway. Everyone is trying to find better ways to be able to communicate to civilians in the roadway. How do I alert them besides just using lights and sirens? It's not meant to replace lights and sirens, but we have to start doing something different. We also don't talk about, we talk a lot about the deaths and injuries of our own folks in the fire, police, and EMS and roadway workers, but it's also the impact on those that we're serving in the community. So National Safety Council released a study, over 200 people in the community were killed with collisions with first responders. So this is also a stat that really doesn't get talked about enough. We also learned that some of the statistics that come out of agencies, they count a law enforcement officer that's standing outside of the road as a pedestrian fatality. So to pull all these numbers together, you really gotta piece these reports and piece this research together to understand truly what is the impact on our communities. So we had the opportunity, as Colby mentioned, to do a pilot about a month or so ago before we wound up signing with MedStar. I want to play a video. We had a chance to talk to the MedStar staff and hear about what their thoughts are on collision prevention and operating EMS in the field. So I'll go ahead and play this about a minute and a half.
Well, it is a story we've been tracking for months. Detroit first responders getting into serious accidents while responding to emergency calls.
One of the things that we encounter today a lot more frequently, and actually wasn't even present when I first got into EMS, is distracted driving and cell phone use. That's been a challenge for us responding to calls.
A typical day can be anywhere from 2 to 3 calls to 10 to 15 calls. They can be as simple as inter-facility transfers or life-threatening, very traumatic calls, injuries. It can be very difficult for us trying to get to scene, especially with the new technology nowadays and the new cars. It's difficult to hear our sirens going.
We're currently looking at HAAS Alert and Safety Cloud system to alert drivers of our approaching emergency vehicles or vehicles they may be approaching if we're on scene working on a roadway. And we believe that the safety benefit is invaluable for not only our employees and other first responders working on the scene, but also the motoring public that may be approaching the scene.
Benefits to motorists getting their alerts directly to their vehicle, and in some cases their phones, if they use that for their map, is a huge impact. With sound deafening insulation installed on all the new cars leading back to the early 2010s and only getting more and more soundproof, having that notification penetrate into the vehicle is a huge step in the right direction for our safety and our patients' safety.
So those alerts that you saw is what you'll be able to see live here today. Those alerts are live in vehicle manufacturers that will talk about which brands, how the technology works, and how it can be deployed within public safety. So this technology you're looking at is called digital alerting. It's actually codified in federal law, so that means those grants, I believe it was Jody, had showed a bunch of grant programs. There's SS4A, Section 405, you have to look at Section 405H very specifically, but digital alerting is available through those grant programs. So over the years, it was very tricky for folks who were applying for grants, and because digital alerting wasn't a thing, it was very hard to get that grantable. So that hurdle has been overcome through the IIJA that passed. So what do the alerts look like? So first, we do integrate with Waze, but it goes way beyond that. Within Waze, you can see the alert, you can see the picture of the ambulance, so when you set up your account, you can actually say what kind of vehicle it is, and so that icon will be applicable. So for EMS, it'll be, you can see the cute little ambulance there, otherwise it's a little fire truck, and so it notifies drivers. Where it says ambulance on scene ahead, this can say ambulance approaching or ambulance on scene, and you can even make it say whatever the name of your agency is, so you can configure that message. So it'll say MedStar, or EMS up ahead, please move over, whatever the case is. Now, you can also receive these notifications within Apple Maps. Apple Maps is a little, you can't configure the icon. It's fairly new, to be transparent. We're working with them on advancing a message more specifically around slow down, move over. But this is something that we continue to integrate with the navigation app providers, so more and more people receive these alerts. We are by far the largest hazard emergency provider in Waze itself. So to all those 4,000 agencies that are on our platform, all of that information processed through Waze since about 2017 has been a huge availability of reach to motorists in their cars before we started working with car manufacturers. So this is really where we've gone over the last 2 years. And this was the hardest challenge for what HAAS Alert was trying to educate the automotive industry on, which was you don't want drivers getting notified just on their phones. What we're trying to do is not shave seconds off your response time. We're trying to make the motoring public more aware of first responders approaching and in the roadway and break driver distraction. We're trying to get them to turn the music down. We're trying to get them to tell the kids to be quiet. We're trying to just break their distraction, look around, and see the emergency vehicle. So we launched 2 years ago with Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram on vehicles 2018 and forward. So I want to make sure that's clear. This isn't about the next new trim lines that are going to come out in 2026 or only available to the newest, fanciest cars, but this was pushed out over the air to vehicles as old as 2028. And it does not cost the motoring public a dime. So this is not a thing where only people who can afford to activate some emergency service notification can get. This is available on anybody that had these vehicles where they received the software update and all of a sudden their car just starts receiving these alerts. Beyond those brands, we also just launched recently with Volkswagen. So Volkswagen can now receive these emergency alerts. We are not in control of the messaging necessarily or how it looks. This will continue to evolve, but what's critical is that car manufacturers have realized we can't wait for perfection. Let's get this out there and get the alerts into drivers' hands so that they can help to slow down, move over, and be aware of what's coming in the roadway. We also launched it's called a production pilot right now. There's thousands and thousands of Mercedes-Benz drivers that are receiving these alerts. So this has been going on for about 3 weeks now. And you can see totally different type of driver interaction and alerting, but what's critical is that there's a tone that plays, notifies the driver, put your hands back at 10 and 2, look around, and pay attention to the emergency vehicle. Now, does it work? What's the data say? What's the ROI? I mean, it sounds obvious. If you alert a driver in a car, the chance of a collision is going to go down. Reminds me of the university that got paid to do a research study on is it safer to jump out of an airplane with a parachute or without. This is obvious stuff. You alert a driver in a car, you play a tone, the chance of collision is going to go down. We looked at over 1,500 drivers from CAA, which is through a deployment with roadside operators in Canada, and 97% of the drivers who received a digital alert slowed down and moved over. DC Fire and EMS received a NHTSA grant to deploy their technology. They saw a 25% reduction in speed after the first alert. And there was a study done at University of Minnesota that showed chance of a collision goes down up to 90% if you alert a driver before they see flashing lights or hear sirens. And you'll notice the date on this. It's 2013. Like, this isn't stuff we haven't known. This isn't new groundbreaking understanding of what happens in the roadway. It was just a lack of being able to connect the motoring public and our first responders. So the MedStar application and partnership that we have with this launch of HAAS Alert was also done through HAAS Tech. So HAAS Tech is one of our 60 partners where you can activate HAAS Alert without having to put any additional hardware onto your fleet vehicles. So because we have these integrations already, this means through HAAS Tech, you can just simply activate HAAS Alert, and when the emergency lights go on, we notify the motoring public. The emergency lights go off, they do not get the alerts. And there's multiple different types of alerts that come with the Safety Cloud solution. So number one is incident alerts. So this is alerting drivers as they're coming up to you, stopped on the side of the road. So the driver gets alerted 20 to 30 seconds ahead of time. So this isn't about last second collision avoidance, it's about prevention. So the driver gets a notification, they have plenty of time to safely slow down, move over, see the emergency vehicle. Then we also have something called moving alerts. So you'll see here, as the emergency vehicle is moving, the driver gets a notification that says emergency vehicle approaching. Very different, still within that 20 to 30 second look ahead, so they're getting that advance notice. And this is, we always get the question of, yeah, but aren't you alerting too many people? The way the solution works, it's down to the specific vehicle. So if one vehicle is traveling south, one's traveling north, you can say alert this car, not that car. So it gets that specific, so you don't have to worry about over-alerting or blasting out to an entire zip code or radius base and alerting drivers on roads that don't need to know about it. It's very specific. The other piece that we do offer is something called responder to responder. So this is fairly new, all around interoperability, where we started to hear from agencies saying, hey, I have HAAS Alert and my neighboring agency has HAAS Alert, but we're police and they're fire. We come up to the same intersection at times. Can you help us avoid collisions with each other? We may not collide, but we have a lot of near misses. So there's these three little LEDs that sit in the A-pillar and will flash if another emergency vehicle is coming up to that same intersection with HAAS Alert on board. So fairly new, but we're seeing more and more agencies start to deploy this as more and more agencies keep coming on and they find out that their neighboring agency is also on the platform. So the two different integrations that you can do, one is an HA7 transponder. If you don't have one of our partners, you don't yet have HAAS Tech, you don't yet have a telematics provider, we have a device, takes about 30 minutes to install, quick, fast, easy. Any of your fleet folks can probably install this if they can exchange a headlight. It's power ground trigger wire, very quick and easy to add to the fleet vehicle. The other is HA Direct, which I mentioned. So if you're already utilizing HAAS Tech, you can activate our service along with other telematics providers, Geotab, Samsara, you name it, we probably integrate with them. And if we don't, let us know and we can probably start integrating. It also comes with a monthly report, so you can see how many driver alerts and totals and this and that. We see a lot of folks delivering this into city councils, using this for their own data and research. And for the research and data analyst folks in the room, yes, you have access to all the raw data. So you can take your own data, you can download it directly from our dashboard, and you can run any type of analysis that you want. So it's not that it's tied into our system, so you can integrate into ArcGIS, Esri, whatever kind of tool it is that you have. The last thing I'll say, and I mentioned this in the beginning, but one of the groundbreaking things that has happened is that the first responder vehicle manufacturers have started to just install at the factory and pay for this. So every day the cities are receiving these new emergency vehicles. The service is already active and on your vehicle. A lot of times we get calls when our customer support team reaches out to a city, the dealer forgot to tell them that it's on the vehicle. They don't even know that they're already broadcasting. So we give them notification, we let them know, and they're like, oh wow, this is great. I thought this was something additional that I was gonna have to pay for. Now, you'll notice there's only one ambulance brand on here. We're trying to work with the other ambulance manufacturers along with police. The other question we always get is, what about Ford and GM? We're not yet working with Ford and GM. We've seen the Stellantis brands and European brands actually jump on board much faster. You'll notice we are strategically located next to Ford's global world headquarters, which is why we are in this space. And so we're doing everything we can to make sure prioritizing first responders is above any other distraction features that those kind of manufacturers want to add into their head units. We're fighting against priorities of autonomous vehicles, of ordering food and coffees in your head unit. And like, these are the kind of things where we're saying, hey, if you're going to add those kind of distractions in the car, let's talk about public safety and first responders first. So we have a pretty simple ask here. One, I know it's kind of, a little awkward sometimes. People don't want to go look at demos. You got to go over to the car. You got to lean in and see what it looks like. And I just want to chat. But please take the time. You can go over in the corner over here. We have 2 vehicles, and you can see the alert like pop up on the head unit. It's amazing when you see it happen, how much it's just not slideware. It's not just something on the screen. But remember, this is deployed in 4,000 agencies, and billions of these notifications are already being delivered to drivers and motorists through navigation apps and these car manufacturers directly already. If you go out here and make a right and go down the stairs, we have a lab downstairs. We've been asked about doing school buses, train crossings, all sorts of stuff. So you can kind of get a feel for what else is coming. But by far, our main priority is police, fire, EMS, getting your agencies into these vehicles to alert drivers. So please take the opportunity while you're here to see the alert, see it with your own eyes, to kind of get that aha moment of like, oh my God, I can't believe this exists. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. So if you have questions, we'll take those now and then we'll look at the cars. Yeah.
I started my 911 career in the fire service. I was
Yeah.
in a paid-on-call fire department, and when our paid-on-call folks are responding to the station, right, we are
Yeah.
not as visible and we're not as seen as maybe the large fire trucks are. So does this go down that far, or is it up to the agencies to decide that?
Yep, so it's up to the agency. So you can decide. Now, we've had some folks where it's public-private mix, which I know a lot of agencies are, and it's usually just a conversation. So we haven't really seen, actually we haven't seen any issues of the 4,000 agencies so far. But yeah, you get to choose. You can also say, hey, I don't want this vehicle to alert when it's moving if you want. Law enforcement sometimes likes to be able to have, they do lights off, sirens off, but digital alerting if they're running into like a robbery call or something. So you can configure it and set it up. But the first thing that has to happen to even do that is you got to tap into Safety Cloud, and then you can configure, activate whatever vehicles that you want. Yeah.
Is there any costs, like a monthly fee or annual fee per police vehicle or others?
Yep, so the business model is, it's a subscription, so we do hardware and subscription bundled. It's around $1, our marketing line is $1 a day. So roughly for about $2,000 for a 5-year license for the hardware version, that HA7 box inside the ambulance. Otherwise, if you integrate with like an A-Stack, it'll cost you about half that. Depends volume, how many vehicles, pricing terms, all sorts of things. But you can generally budget, if you're doing hardware lists, about 50 cents a day. If it's with hardware, about $1 a day. And if you get it from your manufacturer, make sure you ask your dealer if it comes pre-installed, because then you will get the free 5-year activation with it, and it'll be on the vehicle, depending if making sure it's one of those brands where it comes standard. So the service is already paid for. It's not like, oh, the hardware was free, but now I have to pay for the subscription. It's already covered. Yep.
If we're using Geotab, it's already installed in that?
So Geotab is like an A-Stack, so you still have to activate it separately, but it's part of the hardware list. So you don't need that black box installed inside the emergency vehicle. You can just activate through Geotab. There are certain versions of Geotab that I can talk to you about. Of course, we need the data to be 2 seconds or less. So if you haven't subscribed to the real-time data feed, it makes it hard for us to do collision prevention. But yeah, happy to talk through any of that. There's different models for each of those different types of integrations. Yeah. Yeah.
Through your reports, what kind of data do you provide in those reports? Can you be a little more specific?
Yeah, so we'll do driver alerts, so you have something actual tangible. We're starting to get into giving folks the count of near misses, so we can do that. The other pieces of the report, it's not meant to replace your response analytics, it's not meant to replace your CAD data, but because we start the clock of when you're responding, when the emergency lights go on, when you get to the incident, stop moving, we clock that as your response time. As you're sitting there with the emergency lights on, the clock's running as now you're at the incident. When your personnel go to leave that incident, if the lights are still on, then, or the lights go off and they leave that incident, then we stop the clock and say, so now we have your en route time and we have your amount of time you were actively working an active incident on scene. If your folks don't update the MDT and they want to, like a fire apparatus will follow to the hospital or something and they still keep it on incident and they don't clear it, our metrics will actually show that that incident was over because they shut the lights off and broke the geofence. So a lot of times folks will use it to kind of compare what was our response time, what does our CAD show, how long were we at the incident, how many near misses did we have, how many driver alerts were there, like that kind of stuff. All GPS type based things with the emergency light status as active, inactive. So we're not processing that for you. We assume you could do that, but we assume you're already getting that from, your tools like HAAS Tech and others that are already installed, your geotabs and such. We don't like to be utilized as a telematics provider and give you that kind of driving data behavior. We assume most agencies have that in another platform. Most of the agencies are using it as how many collisions did we potentially avoid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for tort.
Right,
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
I'm wearing
okay,
a
so.
different hat for a moment. Yeah,
You get sued,
exactly.
what happens? Okay,
Yeah, so
I got it.
that's
Got it.
what I'm
Yeah.
trying to find out is the data there? So if somebody subpoenas it, are they gonna they're gonna get our speed, our braking, our forces,
Sure.
et cetera?
So-
At the same time, anybody else involved in the incident that we may not be aware of, and so is the plaintiff gonna ask us or the other responder?
Yep. So out of the 4,000 agencies we have, it's been requested 3 times. All of it has come from the actual chiefs themselves. We've never had a subpoena court order. The data contractually is owned by you. So, our stance is, look, you can go subpoena the agency. That data is there, but we're not really looked at the agency of record, the AOR, for driving data. So where we've seen it happen, they're grabbing the data from the VDR on the fire apparatus, they're grabbing data from the MDT, they're grabbing the data from other places. Would we have it? Sure. They'd have to take it, calculate it, display it. But again, we're not the AOR for court order. So the few times we've been asked, it was because the chiefs were trying to prove their lights were on and the driver was saying they weren't. And we had one for a work zone incident where they said the work zone didn't have its amber light on, but in fact, we could prove that they actually did. So, and it's a wired connection. So, we're telling them that it's active. But you're absolutely right. I mean, look, we can't get around that. If that happens, it happens.